Welcome to the Radical Lifestyle Podcast, brought to you by Generation to Generation, where you will be inspired by the past, equipped for the present, and prepared for the future as we engage in conversations with people from around the world. Hello everyone, this is Andrew and Daphne from Generation to Generation, and today our guest is Steph Gutmann. Steph, for people that don't know who you are, can you just say a bit about where you're from and what you do?
So I am from a church in Derbyshire, South Normanton Community Church, and I am the daughter of a pastor. So I'm one of those annoying Christians that kind of can do little bits of everything and often gets called upon to do stuff. So I have the honour of speaking, preaching, doing worship. I'm part of the worship team. I'm also a writer, so I write a blog. When I remember to do that. And I've written a book, and I've got like a couple of books on my laptop that I still need to finish. So yeah, bit of a Christian jack of all trades.
People listening to this, because we're going to talk about some stuff that you've got going on that have kind of been birthed through this last year. For people that hear this and they say, I want to get involved, find out more, where can they do that? Where can they find you?
So when I do remember to update my blog post, it's "You Can't Slouch in Heels." So if you do a Google search for "You Can't Slouch in Heels," you'll find me. And otherwise, it's Facebook. I'm on Facebook quite a lot, so that's just,
okay.
Yeah.
And I'll put both those links in the description. So for people listening, want to go to those, head to the description box and hit the links.
Cool. So I'm going to sum up who you are. You're a whatever your hand finds to do it with all your heart person.
Yeah, there's that. Or there's the one, to whom much is given, much is required. That's the other one, I think, that kind of comes at me all the time.
Yeah, we were just talking about that yesterday or today, particularly in relation to all these podcasts that we're sitting listening to. We're recipients of all this that people are pouring out in these podcasts, and I know it's bigger than that, but there is a sense of responsibility, isn't there, in what we have and who we are.
Yeah.
So just let's start at where we are today, in that I just heard somebody messaged me and said, "Oh, Daphne, Australia is open up to flights," because Australia was well closed. We in the UK, well, I'm not quite sure how much we're opening up, but things
They seem to promise much but deliver little.
Yeah.
It seems.
So we're like, okay,
we're opening up. You can now not really do anything. Oh, yeah. Good.
I think it depends on the situation. I was talking to someone yesterday, and for parents where kids are going back to school, it does feel like things are opening up. But for someone like me, who I live on my own and nothing's changed, I can still meet with like a person and go for a walk and have a takeaway coffee. So it's like literally not changed. It's just the same. I can meet with 5 people instead of 1 person, but yeah.
But in all of that, people are starting to think about coming out of lockdown, whatever that looks like. And this is going out across the world. So in the different nations coming out of lockdown, for whatever length of time, it is going to look different strategically, what it means. But there's something that's very common to just about everybody listening. They have been in lockdown, and now we're facing the possibility of coming out. And I think most people will think, oh, great, we're coming out. But it's not like that for everybody, is it?
No, it's not. But I mean, for me, I've been on this journey throughout the whole, obviously most of us have been on a journey over the last year. And I remember preaching a sermon last year to my church, and obviously when it's on Facebook, it kind of goes beyond that, about how it was a Shabbat year and a year for rest and recharge and allowing God to almost renew that vision within us and renew our spirits and renew who we are and that kind of thing. And not everyone saw that. Not everyone kind of accepted that it should be a Shabbat year, people were kind of fighting against it and be like, no, but I need to be doing something. Or like the whole, a lot of people struggle with that anxiety and they were like, I don't want to do anything. And the whole Jewish perspective of rest and Shabbat is not about just sitting around doing nothing. It's about using that time productively to invest in your relationship with God, to invest in your relationship with each other, and to invest in your relationship with yourself. So that's how I approached last year, in the sense of, okay, it's my Shabbat year. I know that God has made this a Shabbat year for a number of people. And then when we got to the beginning of this year, it was just kind of like God was saying, enough's enough. It's time to start preparing. There's no point in waiting for the lockdown to lift before you start getting ready. You get ready before the doors open. You get ready before it's time to make a move. And it's kind of like, if you think, I was thinking about it this morning when I was thinking about like how this conversation might go. And it was like the parable of the 10 virgins, where 5 were prepared and 5 were not. And there's no point in waiting for the doors to open. There's no point in waiting for Jesus to return to be ready. We've got to be ready now. And so, yeah, over the last year, I kind of like prayed into this idea, and literally I was brushing my teeth and God just downloaded this stuff into my head and into my spirit. And I'm like, just trying to brush my teeth here. I've got to get ready for work.
It's funny, she gets lots of her ideas in the bathroom. So
really,
yeah.
It's just something, because there's no distractions. So, and yeah, I just kind of started to write these ideas down. Thought it'd finish, went back to carry on brushing my teeth, and God was like, yeah, we're not done. So we just carried on, and it turned out to be a 10-day journey of just kind of looking at ourselves and looking at the things that we can do, rather than focusing on what we can't do, rather than focusing on the fact that we've not been able to do anything for a while. That now is time to do stuff, that we can still do things, we can still have an impact for the kingdom, we can still represent God, we can still show his love. So it was kind of looking at the things that we can do and who we are for such a time as this, in order to be ready now and not wait for the doors to open. So that's kind of been the journey for me, in terms of preparing, as well as waiting for a hairdresser and getting my nails done and all that practical stuff. But
I don't know what that's like.
Really?
No. To wait, I mean, so.
Yeah, I don't, yeah.
So what would it look like when you're talking about to be ready? What would be ready look like, or getting ready?
In a spiritual sense or in a practical sense?
Either, both.
I think so. When I did this journey, I kind of looked at some core elements of who we are as people. And although I did the course for women, so there were like 32 women and teenage girls that journeyed with me over the 10 days, which just blows my head, because you have this idea and you're like, oh, this is just a Steph thing. No one's really going to take much notice. But God used it, and he revealed things about each person on the course with me, on the journey with me, to show them things that they can do and start to do now. So we looked at the fact that obviously we're made in the image of God. God created us, male and female, he created us. We're made in his image. We're a representation of him here on earth. And the core of who God is love. 1 John 4 talks about the fact that God is love. And so the core of who we are is love. And yet love has become this distorted, twisted concept on earth. And people kind of relate love to like sexual or romantic love, when actually the core of God is love. And so what we need to do is demonstrate that love to the world around us and be love. So we explored what that meant, and I got people to do the love languages test quiz thing, which was originally developed by Gary Chapman for marriage relationships. But actually, I think at our core, we all have a particular kind of love language that we veer towards, that we find easily able to express. And we then kind of looked at, okay, if that is my love language, how is God showing me through the scripture, what verses can I find where God is showing me love in my love language?
Wow.
And so I got like the women to explore, the aspect of, that the ultimate act of service, that Jesus died on the cross. That's the ultimate act of service that we can never ever top. The fact that God delights in spending time with us, and that's quality time. And, the Bible says that those who seek him will find him, that God delights to draw near to us. When we draw close to him, he will draw close to us. And so that promise of quality time. And we looked at each one of those things and how there is, throughout scripture, the Bible is littered with God's love for us. And when we open our eyes and we can see it, then we can relate it to us and our own situations and our own love languages. And then we looked at how we can use our love language to show love to the world around us. And again, this is not restricted by lockdown. You don't need to hold back from demonstrating love to people just because we're in lockdown. You can still send a text of words of affirmation. You can still arrange to spend quality time with someone by meeting for a coffee and going for a walk. You can still send someone a gift just to kind of say, hey, thinking of you, just wanted to send you something. We can still do those things that shows the love of God to the people who are desperate, so desperate to feel that they are lovable and worth something. And then we looked at ourselves and how often we find it difficult to love ourselves, and how I asked the women to come up with 5 things that they thought was worth something to themselves. And one woman messaged me, she's like, 5? I'm like, if I'd have asked you to do that about your husband or one of your children, you would have done it like that. But a lot of women in particular struggle with that aspect of knowing how to love themselves and show themselves love and receive love from God, and almost putting a barrier upon that. And then from there, because obviously, God is the foundation of who we are and his love is foundational to who we are. We love because he first loved us. His love was demonstrated to us because of the ultimate act of sacrifice that Jesus gave on the cross. So we can walk in that love and we can have the boldness to walk in that freedom. So what does that then look like? And we looked at work, how there's a time for everything under the sun, work and rest. And the fact that a lot of people struggle with rest, and yet God himself rested on the 7th day. And it's one of the commandments, but so many people do not rest. And we've got into this mindset, this Western mindset, where rest is it's almost a bad thing. We're made to feel guilty when actually it's the core of our relationship with God, is being able to rest with him and in him. And Jesus himself rested with the Father. And again, that comes down to, what I was saying earlier, that the Jewish aspect of rest is not about sitting around doing nothing. It's about interacting and engaging with the Father, with our family, with friends and that kind of thing. And then we explored the spiritual gifts and understanding what is my gifting and how can I put that into action. So how can I, what is my gifting? So for me, one of my giftings is teaching. And how can I use that? Well, I use that on my Facebook page. I use that on my blog. I can do little things that share teachings that I'm learning, or things that, I kind of see in the scripture that I can pass on to others. There's no restrictions. We live in an age where there is no restrictions. And the main restriction that a lot of us have, male or female, is the restriction of our own understanding and our own brain and our own limitations. So it's allowing ourselves to move beyond the limitations and move beyond those restrictions and be like, okay, the harvest is plentiful. The harvest is so ripe. What can I do? God, what can I do? I'm one of your laborers. What can I do? Send me into the field. And our field can be our workplace, can be our college, can be friendship groups. It can be anything, but the harvest is white. It's just ready. And we've seen so much. I work in marketing, and we get to see some of the Google searches that people do. And there has been a massive increase in the number of people looking for how to pray, looking for how to read the Bible, looking for, who is God? How can I talk to God? Is God real? These are questions that people have got. And we need to be ready to answer those questions. Otherwise, I'll get the answers from other places and other sources.
So it seems to me you've encouraged people to go from the inside out. I mean, you're here, you're saying, there's people out there, but you started back with me and all of this within lockdown so that I can come out of lockdown mobilised, ready to go. I had a side thought, and I have no idea what I think about this. You're talking about the 5 love languages for us as people, knowing our 5 love languages. Does Jesus have all 5?
Yeah.
I mean, it's never a concept. We don't think of Jesus having love languages, but if he is the fullness, is just having 1 or 2 love languages something that's just peculiar to us, whereas Jesus has them all. In which case, if Jesus has all 5, we're going to be very busy giving him his all 5 back. But he does, doesn't he? It's quality time, words of affirmation, gifts. I mean,
not that he needs them.
No, but it's a love language. So
I know, yeah.
Yeah, so it's an expression, yeah.
Yeah. We give the gift of ourselves, don't we? We give the gift of our hearts to him. And
yeah.
like, even that is not enough for what he did for us. It's just, yeah.
But if you go through all 5, I mean, so words of affirmation, yes, he delights in that. Gifts, yeah.
We give him our crowns and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and there's the quality time, yeah?
Yeah.
Come on, what's number 4?
Acts of service.
Acts of service, yes.
Physical touch.
No.
Yeah, well, people...
Not. I'm thinking directly towards Jesus. So we can operate in 4 of them towards Jesus.
When he was walking around physically, there was...
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just an interesting...
People lying with their heads on his chest and...
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Wiping his feet with their hair and...
Yeah.
Putting their fingers in his hands.
Yeah. Well, so what has happened? So you've been encouraging these people to go through, how many days was it?
10. So it was a 10-day journey, and it started 2 weeks Thursday, so the 25th of March, and then it finished on Easter Saturday.
And
so,
what do people say at the end of it?
There have been so many messages from people who God has used. So one woman did the course with her daughter. Her daughter, I think, is 11 or 12. And she said that it's helped their relationship because they're able to explore things together and understand that whole love language and learning to speak together as a mother and a daughter. And then there were people who, there's about 3 or 4 people who, when they did the so-called spiritual test, the spiritual gifting test, and I've never said that it's definitive, it just gives us a focus point to pray into. There were a few people who were surprised at what came up and they want to explore that, and I've kind of suggested that they speak to the leadership and get their church leadership around them to pray, and a prayer partner, just to kind of explore that and see, is this something that God has given to me? Because ultimately, the Bible tells us that the Holy Spirit gives the gifts as he wills. It's not something that we can be like, oh, actually, God, can I have the gift of healing, please? We can't do that, although we would love to be able to do that. And so it's just understanding, okay, if this is the gift that God has given to me, I need to be able to talk with God and walk with him and understand, okay, how can I use this? How can I put this into action? How can I walk this out? And so, yeah, a lot of them are starting to explore that element of themselves that they've never really thought about before. And they've never really considered themselves to have a spiritual gift or to be someone that God can use. And I think for me, that's the saddest thing about church and a lot of Christians, is they don't believe that they are able to do something. They just kind of leave it for the professionals, the church leaders or missionaries or evangelists or teachers. They leave it for them to do, when actually I firmly believe that God gives everyone, and we are eagerly to desire for him to use us and to give us the gift that he needs us to use in our situations and where we are, and to be open to that. So yeah, a lot of people were kind of exploring that aspect. And then there was, because we looked at work, there were a couple of people who were had never considered that to be their place where they can be a witness and they can be an evangelist, or they can be God in that kind of situation. And so they're looking at how they can use that opportunity that God has placed people around them who don't know him. And so asking him for openings to be able to speak to them, to speak, to share the gospel with them, just to share love, not even to preach at them. It's just to be the representation of Christ in that situation. So yeah, a lot of people just impacted.
But going back to this issue of lots of people think that they can't be ministers, that they can't do all these. I think actually, and I'm just going to use this as a very broad phrase, the church hasn't helped that. I don't think we've helped it by phrases like full-time ministry, because we're all in full-time ministry. I don't think we've helped it by giving people titles and whatever that title is. I mean, even if it's a title like I'm in charge of refreshments, or whatever it is. But once you give somebody a title, other people stand back from the title because we haven't got that title. Yeah. And I think, I think, we've had examples of people saying about us, haven't we, that they wish they could be like us.
Don't know why anyone would want to do that, but anyway.
But then I have to say to them, no. We have all been given something Jesus wants us to do, and our role is to be faithful in it, and he's just looking for faithfulness. So I think I agree with you. Many people do not realise what they have to offer the church and the world, but then I think too, the church hasn't helped that. In that we so look to put people in position or to give them responsibility instead of mobilising people, if you see what I mean. And I think too, sometimes it can be a bit of a control issue, that if people have ideas, they have something, you have to go through a process before you can be released into it, and you've got to, all the hoops and everything. So I think it's sad, but I think that has been compounded within the body of Christ, and then many people have picked that up and think that that's normal. Am I being unfair, do you think?
No, I think there are churches like that, and I think there are leaders like that. I think I've been blessed in that the churches I'm like, my church leaders I think they're kind of used to me. So when I'm like, I've got this great idea, they're like, okay, run with it. But I have, obviously when I was growing up, because I'm the daughter of a Baptist minister, I think I did have openings that my dad was able to support me with, which probably a lot of people don't have that opportunity. I think when I was 15 or 16, I decided that I wanted to do a worship evening and get all the churches in the local town together, which had never been done before. And I'm like, let's do a worship night, and I'll organise it, and we'll get all the churches in. And my dad was like, not quite sure that'll work, but see what you can do. And I did. And we got representation from various churches, and it was a really good night. And that was probably my first experience of having an idea and learning how to put it into action, rather than, and I think, some Christians have an idea and they don't know what to do with it, and they just sit on it, and then it just kind of, it becomes nothing. And I've had that as well, where I've had an idea and it just felt too big, or it's just felt too much. I'm like, I can't, God, that's not me, I can't deal with that one. But I think, I've had the honour, and my pastor in my current church is, sometimes he'll look at me and be like, I'm not quite sure what that's going to do, but go for it.
Yeah, but I think too, one of the things that probably stops people when they have ideas, when they feel that they've got giftings, is a fear of failure.
Yeah.
Because if you have something that you feel you want to do, whatever it is, whether it's in the home, whether it's outside, whatever it is, there is this fear of failure.
Yeah.
And what will happen if I fail, and what will other people think that I fail? As far as ideas being too big, I always think, well, every idea starts with one small step.
You eat an elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah, we had this idea to do a documentary, bring 11 young people from across the world to Israel and all that. We had no film crew, we had no experience, we have no finances, we have nothing. And much as it seemed impossible, we just started walking the journey. And at the end of the day, we did it, or God did it. So I think, again, it's people's confidence.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the things that you have said, encouraging people during this lockdown time is building their confidence. It's building their awareness of who they are and what they have to offer and who God has made them to be.
Yeah.
We always say encourage people to fail.
Yeah.
People always want to not fail. We say, no, go and fail. I mean, everyone who's succeeded at things have had failures along the way. You learn from those and grow, and they prepare you for the success which is to come. So we always say to people, look, encourage people to go out there and fail.
Absolutely. I mean, one of my friends, he was the worship pastor when I was in London, and one of the things that he used to say, and I kind of think that I live by this, is if you're going to make a mistake, make it a big one. If you're going to do something, do it properly, but do it. Just do it. So, as someone who organises events and that kind of thing, I understand that you want to get it right. You don't want to mess up. You don't want to waste the church money. You don't want to waste people's time and that kind of thing. So I get it, completely get it. But it's better to have tried than just to sit back and nothing happens, because nothing will happen. So yeah.
But then that draws us back then too to what happens when we see other people making mistakes.
We have to allow it. We have to give people the freedom. Like Jesus gives us the freedom to make mistakes. God gave Adam and Eve the freedom to make a mistake. He told them what not to do, knowing what they were going to do. And he allowed them the freedom to make that mistake. I think in church, we are so focused on being right and being seen to be right. And I've been in a church where you have to be seen to be doing the right thing. Whether you're doing the right thing or not is irrelevant. You have to be seen to be doing the right thing. And that's a completely different message. That's completely the wrong message. And, just reiterates that fact that a lot of people think Christians are hypocritical, because you have to be seen to be doing the right thing. And actually, I think we have to give people the freedom to be able to make mistakes. I've made tons of mistakes.
No.
I know, shocking.
What? That is some breaking news right there.
I know, but I am a pastor's daughter, so.
Oh, well.
So making mistakes as a pastor's daughter is a whole other level, and
whole different level.
Thank God for your parents who gave you that freedom. But we were just reading this morning about how after Jesus rose from the dead, and he said, "Go and tell the disciples and Peter." And I thought
it's interesting that he highlighted Peter.
Yeah, who made a mistake. I mean,
3 times.
Pretty big. In fact, he made mistakes
more than that.
Yeah,
all of his life, And yet Jesus said, "Go and tell him and Peter." And I think
you may have denied me, but
go and let him know that I'm alive, I'm okay, and you're going to be okay. And I think this whole issue of making mistakes is too that we need to have the grace towards people that Jesus has when they made mistakes, because probably the fear of failure comes from what you think other people are going to say as much as anything else.
Yeah, definitely.
So us having the grace to have the grace that Jesus has when we make mistakes.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is a big thing, that fear of other people, that peer pressure. Yeah, I know that's held me back quite a few times, especially when I was growing up. everyone knew that I was the Baptist minister's daughter in school, and so like I tried to do things to kind of prove that I wasn't like a stereotypical Christian, because of the peer pressure that school friends and, you know, people that I didn't really care about and are no longer in contact, but I allowed them to hold me back. And I think a lot of us allow people who really don't matter in the grand scheme of things to hold us back from fulfilling the purpose for which we've been created. And we've been created for such a time as this. And, you know, there's just too many people who are pew warmers waiting for someone else to do the job that they know God has placed within them. But there's so much anxiety, there's so much fear, there's so much depression, there's so much like in our heads. Like I would love for people to get out of their heads a little bit more and just be like, okay, I'm not sure if I can do this. I'm afraid. It's keeping me awake at night. But you know what? I'm just going to try and take a step and see what happens. I'm just going to try and push a door and see what happens. I'm just going to put my trust in God. And it's that faith of a mustard seed, just be able to say, I'm not quite sure. I don't know if this is what I should be doing. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I believe God has called me to do this. I'm believing that this is something that he wants me to do. So I'm going to take a step and I'm going to make a move towards that. And yeah, I would love to see more people feel free to achieve that in their own situations and their own lives.
If we take this back into lockdown, all the things that you have just said, you know, depression, etc., is something that people have battled with in lockdown. Yep. And I know I have heard of people who are usually very confident, suddenly are lacking the confidence to leave the house, to go out and to get back into society.
Very anxious about
for all the reasons that you have just said. And I think if people can take away again what you said, not just about having ideas and what we do, but that confidence in Jesus to leave the house, to go out, to get back in touch with society, because the world, the government, everybody is just filling people with fear.
Yeah,
that's the message. Be afraid, be scared. This is coming. Third wave. Don't be careful. But it's just flooding people's minds with fear. Yeah. That it's a major, major thing to step out. And I think, thank God, literally, that you have focused on people in their home almost to prepare them for that time.
Yeah, there's one easy answer to that, and I did this really early on because I could have allowed the whole fear and, oh my days, is like, it's increasing, it's never going to go away, we're all going to die, this is it, this is the end of the world is now. And I switched off the news. I stopped watching the news. I stopped looking at stuff. I'm like, I don't need this filling my head and my spirit. I don't need this. It's hard enough trying to do lockdown as a single woman without having the pressure and the fear and the anxiety being thrown upon me, because we pick things up from other people. We pick things up from what we're seeing, and we allow that to invade our thoughts and become our own thoughts and our own mentality, and just switch it off. Focus on something else.
One of the things I've said to people during this time, one of your primary tasks is to learn self-care.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're all different in how we do that. So when we looked at rest on the 10-day journey, like I filmed myself in the middle. I can't believe I did this. Filmed myself in the middle of a public country park, like talking about rest and what I love to do. I'm like looking around, making sure no one can see me. Oh, awkward. But we all recharge in different ways. There are all things that we find restful. Like my mum used to lock herself away in the bathroom. I've got 3 brothers, so there were 4 of us in the house, and she used to lock herself away in the bathroom and have a long bubble bath with a book. And I that to me sounds like a nightmare. I would much rather rather be out than seen in my own dirty water. Anyway, different story. You're right there, Andrew.
Just careful what you say when I've got a mouthful of coffee.
Yeah, sorry, not sorry. But we all recharge in different ways, and we all that aspect of self-care, I think, is an important thing. Like Jesus, he invested in that in terms of going away from the crowds. He went away from the disciples. He went away from everyone. He took himself away in order to recharge with God and to recharge himself away from that. And I think that is so, so important. What you said, Daphne, is absolutely crucial. That element of self-care. And yet we feel guilty when we do it. We feel like we have to be doing something.
And you were talking about the commandments, and we all obey them all. But then when it comes to the rest, it's like, well, what does that actually mean, rest? Like, we always all this massive debate about this one. It's like, did he really mean that? I don't know,
Yeah, that's what I love about Israel is like everything shuts down on a Friday, an hour before sunset. Everything just shuts down. So you can't do anything anyway. You have to rest, and it's like family meals, just being with family and friends and just recharging and not thinking about work and pressure and the things that just destroy us from the inside out, really. So
But this rest thing, again, is an individual thing, isn't it? Because what is rest for you might not be rest for me. And people say to me, well, we're X, Y, Z, so you can rest. And I'm thinking, you have no idea that is not rest to me. Yeah. So I think, when we're wanting to give a gift of rest or a gift of anything, it's always to say to people, what would be rest for you?
Yeah.
What would be rest for you? It's not a one size fit all. It's really important to, what is rest for you?
Yeah, and that's why. So the whole journey, the 10-day journey, it was a private Facebook group, and I would set like questions and things. So I did a daily video and kind of explored the theme and the concept, and then I would set a question or set a challenge or whatever. And when it came to the day of rest and looking at what rest means, it just showed how different we all are, because every single person in the group had a very different understanding and concept of rest. And what some people, like you said, what some people find rest, like my mum, her idea of rest is being in the bath. To me, that's just a nightmare. I'm like, no, I can't be doing with that. I need to get out and be in the fresh air and like be moving. But we are so different. And like one person, she was saying about how for her resting is being able to do her nails and to self-care in a physical sense, and just to feel good about herself by doing the practical things. Whereas another person, their idea of resting was to go for a run. Again, nightmare. Like to me, that was just so not restful. But that's the beauty of how God made us, that we are so individual, so unique, so different, and yet we all reflect a different aspect of who he is.
So when we are in families or with other people, having this understanding of the people that we're with is, and this is where friendships and growing in intimacy and understanding is so important, so that we are sensitive to each other and we can encourage one another. We can give each other the encouragement in the areas that they need it. Because I'm just thinking about lockdown, like there's some people, they want to be on top of the news. They want to hear the latest thing. It kind of gives them a sense of control, that we know what's going on. So it's helpful to them. Whereas I was like you, I had to stop. I allowed myself to listen to the news midday because I wanted to know what was going on, and I wanted to know what the signs of the times are and all that sort of thing. So midday, not first thing in the morning, not last thing at night, but midday I would, because I knew I needed to protect myself. Yeah. But I think you more were wanting to listen to it, weren't you?
Yeah, but that's just, I'm always diving into the
But that was
political stuff and all that kind of stuff.
But but in the middle of the intensity of lockdown and everything.
Yeah.
So it's that sensitivity to each other and what is healthy for each other. But
yeah, I would be listening to all this stuff, getting all this information, and at first I would go, "Oh, they just said this or they just said that," and then I would be like, "What the?" I'm just spilling it out, and they're like, "No, can't do it." I shut that off, and now I've got you talking to me. So they were like, "Listen, if you need to tell us something, and you did want to know certain things, yes, you would say to me." I do want to know the highlights, the main points, if there's something that affects us, but you need to tell me the next day in the morning or the afternoon, not right before she goes to bed, because then she goes to bed and is stewing on what it is that I just told her that I'd heard in the media. And so I had to learn, here are the boundaries that work for you, and kind of work with that. So it's learning how do you process things in a way which doesn't then jack up other people when you're doing it.
yeah.
Well, it's the love languages really with a twist as well, isn't it? It's how do we not mess people up, as well as how do we encourage them and give.
Yeah.
And
it's having that awareness that we're not all the same, and you can't expect others in the household or in your friendship circles or in your family to be exactly as you are, and to have that sensitivity to who they are and what they're dealing with. And we all process things in different ways, and we're all, we all had our own ways of dealing with the lockdown and dealing with the pandemic and trying to make sense of what was going on. And for me, I just felt like everyone had an opinion, and a lot of the time the opinion was being passed off as fact, and it was doing my head in. I'm like, I don't need to know what Karen's opinion is on being presented on the local news, because where's her doctorate, where's her science background, why is she trying to tell me that everything's a mess when she's got no real knowledge and no experience? She's just talking about what her mate said and what she heard when she was talking to her friend's sister, and it just got crazy. And politicians were sharing their opinion without having the factual information, and it just became ridiculously overwhelming of opinion rather than fact.
Everyone became an expert.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I needed to sift out what was real and what was just fake news.
Hopefully people have spent time focusing on themselves and what is good for me. We don't need, as we move out of lockdown, just to throw all that to one side. And we don't have to go back to watching the news all the time. If it wasn't healthy then, it's not healthy now for us. No. And so, particularly with what you've been doing, and hopefully if people listening, they've picked up things that as we move forward, we can say, okay, how can I stay healthy? How can I help others to be healthy? How can we not get sucked into all that is still going on and will continue to go on, in order that we can be who God created us to be, whether we're in lockdown, out lockdown, amongst people, social distance or whatever? How can we have that security in who God made us to be and be all he made us to be, regardless, which is huge.
It is, yeah, it is. But there are examples in the scripture, Esther. If you look at Esther and, the whole story of Esther and Purim and that kind of thing, if she'd have listened to the voice of fear, if she'd have listened to that, the kind of, the rules and the regulations of the day was that she should never have approached the king. Even though she was married to him, she had no business approaching him. If she'd have allowed herself to be restricted in that way, then the Jewish people would not be, God probably would have raised someone else up, but he raised up Esther at that point, and she had to step out of her anxiety. She had to step out of her fear. She had to step out of those restrictions and those boundaries, and she had to put herself out there and be like, I'm doing this for other people. And she had the prayer support, she got people fasting, but she stepped out, and she, obviously we know that the Jewish people were rescued and restored, and, God has still got a purpose for his people. But then you've also got Deborah, another female who, at that time, as a female judge and as someone that was kind of, God raised her up. And again, she could have allowed herself to be restricted by the fact that the enemy was coming at her, and she's just a woman, and the general was like, oh, I'm not going to go unless you come with me. And she's like, well, I don't want to go into war. I'm just a woman. I'm just here to judge people. I don't want to go into war. Who am I to go into war? And she could have stayed in that place. And again, Israel could have been destroyed. And, there's so many examples in scripture of people who stepped out of the boundaries and stepped out of that fear. Peter walking on the water. What sane person does that? What sane person is like, oh, I'd quite like to get out the security of my boat and stand on water that's a bit choppy. Thank you very much.
I do it sometimes if I'm at a swimming pool. I try and walk on the water.
Really? How does that go for you?
Not very well.
No.
But of course, along in that dynamic with Esther, she had the encouragement and the challenge of Mordecai.
Yeah, but we've got the encouragement of one another, haven't we?
Yeah, you can do this, Esther. You can do this. Look, you better do this. And so, there is again that double dynamic of us having that boldness, but to encouraging other people. Yeah. So as we begin to finish, and as people are listening to this, literally all over the world, if you're going to say just a couple of things to them as they're looking at moving out of lockdown, maybe getting on airplanes for the first time, met some people who've been shielded going to the store for the first time, and we're talking a good year, what would you say to them?
That's a good question. I think I would say that we all feel fearful, and we're all fearful of different situations and the different things that are approaching us. But now is the time to tackle that fear before you have to go out. Now is the time to deal with that anxiety. What is it that's making you anxious? What is it that you're actually afraid of? And how can we deal with that before we need to be in that situation where we're about to step out of the door? It's preparing now. So it's praying it through. It's getting a therapy if we need therapy. It's talking to someone. It's having a prayer partner, someone who can support us and encourage us and be our cheerleader. And, you're not on your own. You're so not on your own. And I think that's the biggest thing, is because we've been made to feel like we're on our own, that we've lost that sense of community. We've lost that sense of togetherness. Yeah. We've lost that sense of family. And it's about reconnect with someone who can support you on this journey you're about to embark on. But start preparing now. Don't wait. And start to make that preparation internally ready for when you go out there.
Yeah, that sounds great. Steph, thank you so much. Hopefully people listening will have got some really helpful tips, some things that they can take from this and start to really apply to themselves. Again, for people listening, if you want to get in touch with Steph, see what she's doing, some of her crazy field videos, then go to the description box and head over there. Steph, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been really good.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If it inspired you, please rate us and subscribe on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or another podcast platform.